Billionaire's son gets into the car and hears a black waitress tell him to shut up. The reason was, Darren, the son of a billionaire, expected nothing less than admiration when he stepped into the high-end restaurant. He was used to being treated like royalty, his family's wealth opening doors everywhere. But when Jada, a black waitress, approached their table, Darren couldn't resist making a comment about her less-than-polished service. To his surprise, Jada calmly replied, "Shut up." Darren was taken aback. Nobody had ever spoken to him like that, especially not someone in her position. As he stared at her, waiting for an apology, Jada didn't back down. Instead, she spoke with quiet strength, revealing that she had endured far more than he could ever understand. What made her so unbothered by his wealth and status? And what was behind that bold response? Where are you watching from? What do you think Darren will do next? Let me know in the comments. Darren couldn't stop thinking about Jada's words. Shut up. It had been bothering him for days. He was the son of a billionaire, someone used to admiration, praise, and deference. People usually saw his last name and treated him with a kind of reverence, but not Jada. And that bothered him more than he cared to admit. He returned to the restaurant, hoping to somehow fix the awkwardness. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding, he thought. But when Jada approached him again, there was no apology, no shift in her demeanor. She was the same, composed, strong, unwavering. "I didn't mean to offend you," Darren finally said, trying to break the silence. "But why did you say that to me?" Jada paused for a moment, then looked him in the eye. "Because you needed to hear it. You don't understand what it's like to be judged by everything except who you are. You don't understand how hard it is to have people like you assume that you're nothing more than the job you're doing." Darren was taken aback. He had never really considered that someone like Jada might be going through something so much more profound than what he had known. He'd grown up in a world where everything was handed to him: power, privilege, opportunities. But Jada's world? It was one of struggle, of fighting just to be seen as something more than a stereotype. She continued, her voice steady but filled with a quiet strength. "I grew up in a neighborhood where opportunities weren't handed out. I've been judged by the color of my skin and the job I do, but I've never let that define me. And I won't let someone like you think you can put me back in that box just because you're used to people bowing to you." Darren was stunned. The words stuck with him long after he left the restaurant. How had he been so blind? He didn't understand it all, not yet, but something was changing. He was starting to see through a lens he'd never looked through before. As the days passed, Darren wrestled with the guilt of his past ignorance. The more he reflected, the more he realized that he had been living in a bubble, unaware of the real struggles that people like Jada faced. His world was changing, and he was unsure where it would lead him. Would he keep living a life driven by his family's wealth and expectations? Or would he make a choice to truly see people for who they were, not just what they did? Darren had learned something that day, something that would continue to challenge him. And with each passing moment, he couldn't shake the feeling that his path had just crossed with someone who would change everything for him. As the days turned into weeks, Darren found himself thinking about Jada more than he ever expected. His usual routine, work, parties, spending time with his friends, suddenly felt empty, like something was missing. He couldn't stop replaying their conversation in his head. The way she stood up for herself, the quiet strength in her voice, the truth in her words. He had never met anyone like her before. Darren tried to push it all aside, to focus on his family and his responsibilities, but the discomfort lingered. Every time he looked at his father, Julian, the billionaire businessman who had shaped his life, Darren couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. The more he thought about Jada, the more he realized how much he had been living in a world of privilege, blind to the struggles of people like her. One evening, as he sat with his father at a high-end event, Julian caught a glimpse of Darren's distraction. "What's going on with you, son?" Julian asked, his voice cold and firm as usual. Darren hesitated, then said, "I've been thinking a lot about what happened with that waitress, Jada. I think I've been living in a bubble, not understanding how much harder some people have it." Julian's expression hardened. She's just a waitress, Darren. You can't waste time on people like her. You're meant for bigger things, for running the business, not for... I know, Darren cut him off, but his voice trembled slightly. But isn't that the problem? We look at people like her and think they're nothing more than their jobs. I think I've been blind to a lot of things, Dad. I've been seeing the world through the wrong lens. Julian, ever the businessman, scoffed. You don't get it, son. There are people who are meant to serve, and then there are people who lead. You need to focus on your future, on your legacy. Darren's chest tightened. The pressure to follow in his father's footsteps, to adhere to a life built on wealth and power, felt suffocating. He had been groomed for success, but now that success felt hollow. Jada's words echoed in his mind, "People like you think you can put me in a box." His decision felt like a weight he couldn't ignore any longer. The friendship with Jada had been eye-opening, but now it felt like it might cost him everything he had always known. His father would never approve, and yet, Darren was beginning to question if that was the life he wanted to lead. Could he stand by and watch his father continue to perpetuate the divide between the privileged and the working class? Was it worth it to keep quiet, to pretend that everything was fine, when deep down, he knew it wasn't? The tipping point came one night when Darren found himself alone with his father in their massive family estate. Julian had warned him again about getting too close to Jada, his voice dripping with disdain. "If you keep this up, Darren, you'll lose everything we've built. You won't have a future here." It was a choice that Darren hadn't expected to make. He could either follow his father's path, the path that promised wealth, status, and power, or he could choose a different future, one that wasn't defined by his family's name. For the first time, Darren realized that the life he'd been living, the one that revolved around his father's expectations, wasn't enough. He had to stand up for something that mattered more than money. Darren's decision was not made lightly. That night, he reached out to Jada, asking if she would help him start a foundation to provide resources for children who had been overlooked, just as she had been. It wasn't much, but it was a step in the right direction. A small rebellion against everything his father had taught him. The twist was simple, but profound. Darren had finally decided to take control of his own life. Darren stood at the crossroads, facing the biggest decision of his life. His father, Julian, had arrived at his doorstep with an offer he couldn't ignore. Come back to the family business, regain his place in the empire, and forget about the foundation. The temptation was there, to return to the world of power and wealth that had always been within his reach. But Darren knew he couldn't go back. The foundation, despite all its struggles, had shown him what truly mattered. It was never about the money. It was about helping others, about being a part of something greater than himself. With newfound clarity, Darren turned down his father's offer. He wasn't giving up on the foundation. He was giving up the life that had been chosen for him. Julian, surprisingly, didn't get angry. Instead, he quietly acknowledged Darren's decision. It wasn't an approval, but it was a silent understanding, one that spoke volumes. Darren was finally free to build his own legacy. With Jada by his side, Darren pushed forward, and the foundation started to gain real traction. Donations flowed in, partnerships formed, and soon the change they had dreamed of was becoming a reality. If Darren's journey touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. Darren had found his purpose, and in doing so, had set himself free from the expectations that once defined him. The world was now his to shape, and he was determined to make it better for others. In the end, it's not about what you're given, but what you choose to give back. Months passed, and Darren's decision to stay true to his values was proving to be more difficult, yet more rewarding than he could have imagined. The foundation was growing stronger each day, its reach expanding far beyond the initial boundaries they had set. Kids who once had little hope now had access to resources, mentors, and the chance to create a future they never thought possible. Darren couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment, something that had always eluded him when he was just chasing wealth and status. Jada, ever the quiet force behind the scenes, had become not only his partner but a friend who understood him in ways no one else did. Her wisdom, her resilience, and her unwavering belief in the cause had grounded him when everything else felt unstable. But as the foundation grew, so did the challenges. There were still people who didn't believe in the work they were doing. There were critics who scoffed at the idea of pouring money and effort into a cause that didn't guarantee immediate profits. The corporate world, which Darren had once known so well, didn't see the value in helping others if it didn't directly benefit them. But Jada reminded him, time and time again, that the impact of their work wasn't about instant results. It was about planting seeds for a better future, seeds that would grow over time, long after they were gone. One evening, after a long day of meetings and strategy sessions, Darren sat in his office overlooking the city. The weight of the world still felt heavy on his shoulders, but it was a different kind of weight now, one that felt purposeful. He glanced at a photo on his desk. It was a picture of him and his father, taken years ago during a family vacation. They looked so happy, so unified. But looking at it now, Darren couldn't help but realize how far apart they had drifted. It was a hard truth to face, that his father, despite everything, might never fully understand his choice. Darren's phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Julian. "I've been thinking about everything you've done, son. I don't fully agree, but I respect your decision. I see now that you're not just trying to change the world, you're trying to change yourself. I can't offer you the empire, but I can offer you this. If you ever need help, you know where to find me." Darren sat back, feeling a mix of emotions. The message wasn't an apology, nor was it an endorsement. But it was the first step toward reconciliation. The walls between them hadn't come down completely, but they had cracked just enough for a glimmer of understanding to shine through. That night, Darren met with Jada at the Foundation's new office. The space was simple but filled with energy, with children's drawings on the walls and volunteers brainstorming ideas for the next community outreach. It was everything Darren had dreamed of when he had first met her, a place where people from all walks of life could come together to make a difference. "You were right, you know," Darren said to Jada, his voice quiet but filled with emotion. "This is what I was meant to do. This, helping people, seeing the change, being part of something real. I'm glad I made the choice I did." Jada smiled, her eyes reflecting both pride and quiet strength. "It wasn't an easy path, but you didn't walk it alone. You had the courage to face what was inside you, and that's what matters." Darren nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. The foundation was more than just a cause to him now. It was a reflection of the man he had become. And it wasn't just about the kids they were helping. It was about his own personal growth, his journey toward humility, compassion, and understanding. Months later, as Darren stood in front of a large audience during a gala to raise funds for the foundation, he looked out at the crowd, many of whom had once turned away from him because of his father's legacy. But tonight, they were all here to support the cause, to stand behind something that truly mattered. Darren's heart swelled with gratitude. "I used to think success was about building an empire," Darren said, his voice steady but emotional. "But I've learned that true success is about building people up, about lifting others so they can lift themselves. And that's what this foundation is all about. It's not just my dream anymore. It's all of ours." The crowd erupted into applause, but Darren's eyes found Jada in the back of the room, watching him with a knowing smile. She had been the one who had helped him see the world differently, to redefine what success truly meant. Together, they had created something that would outlast them, something that would change lives for generations to come. As the evening drew to a close, Darren took a moment to step outside, breathing in the cool night air. The city lights twinkled below, and for the first time, he felt at peace. He had given up everything his father had taught him, and in return, he had found a new life, one filled with purpose and a future that was truly his own. Sometimes, it takes losing everything to truly find what matters. Darren had lost his father's approval, his old life, and the wealth that came with it. But in doing so, he had found his voice, his purpose, and a way to make the world better. And that was more valuable than anything money could buy. If you found inspiration in Darren's journey, please like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the power of change, hope, and kindness. Thank you for being part of this journey. As Darren looked back at the path he had walked, He knew that it had been the right one. He had chosen a life that mattered, one filled with heart, purpose, and love. And that, he realized, was worth more than any fortune.